We're live. Okay, boomer.
We're live.
God.
Okay, let's go.
Coolio. Well, we got some viewers. Is that one of them? Probably you, Scott.
Probably. Well, let's just go anyway.
Yeah, no, awesome. All right, guys, welcome to this very special episode of Some Like It Scott, part of the Media Plug Podcast Network. Not one of our typical episodes, but we all have all the free time in the world as we watch all 90 of, the award season movies that have been coming out over the last month, and we thought we'd hop on here, do a special live episode, talk about the Golden Globe nominations. We will spend most of the time, the next 30-45 minutes talking about the movies and the movie categories, but we will touch briefly on the TV shows, because in spite of the fact that Scott and I only talk about pretty much exclusively talk about movies on the podcast, we do watch our fair share of TV shows as well, and there are arguably even some bigger snubs in the TV categories to briefly touch upon than the movie ones. But to get us started, as always, I'm here with my co-host, Scott Harvey. Scott, how are you doing today? Oh, are we having technical difficulties? All right. Scott will rejoin shortly, and we'll be back in just a moment. Hopefully he will rejoin. There he is.
Hey, Mike.
Hey,
great time to.
With me, I have my co-host, Scott Harvey. Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Scott. Excited to talk about these. Maybe excited isn't quite the right word. Peeved, maybe, would be a more appropriate word. But, that's just award season. And it's good to see that some things are consistent, that award season is always going to let you down. And that's starting here with the Golden Globes. And I'm sure that will continue with the Oscars. But there are highlights, too, and we'll talk about those.
I was gonna say maybe the operative question to go into our discussion then is not whether or not award season, and particularly the Golden Globes here, because that's our topic of conversation right now, has let you down, but has it let you down less than usual, Scott? Why don't we kind of just start with the quote unquote big winners of the nominations, and that is, of course, just thinking in terms of sheer number of nominations, Marriage Story, 6 nominations, kind of leading the way there. Our review of Marriage Story, if you're watching this live, isn't been out yet. It'll be out tomorrow morning. But Scott, are you surprised at all that Marriage Story is leading the way?
No, I don't think so. This is one of the big hitters of the awards season. I think I talked about this on our Marriage Story episode, which you can hear tomorrow. But this is one of the 3 movies. There may be 4 movies, but definitely 3 that I feel is a lock for a Best Picture nomination at the Oscars. This movie, The Irishman, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood are the 3 movies that I think will absolutely be in there. And so it's not a surprise to see them nominated here. Whether it is a frontrunner to win this award is a different question, I think. But I'm not surprised to see it in there. And, it's a great movie. So I'm glad to see it in there as well. Spoiling my review a little bit for tomorrow, I guess, but it's a great movie. And I'm glad to see it in there because, last year when we talked about like the big winners from these nominations, we were talking about movies like Bohemian Rhapsody and Vice, and Great is the absolute antithesis to those movies. So it's nice that at least up top with the big winners, quote unquote, as you called them, we have some legitimately very good films.
Yeah, and you mentioned The Irishman and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as what you view as the other 2, definite locks for a Best Picture nomination at the Oscars, and those are the 2 movies that got 5 nominations. So kind of in close contention there with Marriage Story with 6, and just to run out some of the other nominations list, with 4 nominations each, you have Joker, which might be our spoiler, our a la Vice and Bohemian Rhapsody, although I think it's closer to Vice than Bohemian Rhapsody. I felt very meh about Bohemian Rhapsody, and obviously actively did not like Vice, which is how I felt about Joker. And then coming in with 3 nominations are 1917, Knives Out, Parasite, and Rocketman, a la Bohemian Rhapsody there, with Taron Egerton, I believe, getting a nomination. And I believe this also got one for Best Motion Picture, Musical or Comedy, as well as I think maybe a Best Song nomination. Yeah, I did. I'm gonna love me. Yeah, love me
the
again.
new song that they wrote for the movie.
Yeah. So that's the 3 nominations for Rocket Man. And then there's a much longer list of ones with 2 nominations. But I think worth saying here, and just to zoom out for a second, then we can talk about individual categories, Scott, that you want to talk about. But the big winner here in the nominations, yes, we've gone through individual movies, but clearly Netflix. I mean, Netflix here with Marriage Story and The Irishman and The Two Popes all getting 4 or more nominations. I think,
and Dolomite Is My Name as well, getting several nominations.
Well, no, yeah, so that's what I was going to say, and then kind of in lagging behind a little bit with 2 nominations relative to The Two Popes with 4, The Irishman with 5, and Marriage Story with 6 is Dolomite, and so I think the grand total of their film nominations is close to 20, and they led the way in terms of studios with nominations. And we talked about last year with Roma. They may have thought that The Ballad of Buster Scruggs might have pushed their awards contention a little bit forward. It didn't really do that last year, but this year, I mean, they have 4 movies that are competing for Oscars. I don't think Dolomite will win any Oscars, but The Two Popes, maybe I'm a little bit surprised they got so many nominations here. I haven't seen the film yet. It's not out on Netflix. I might go see it tomorrow because it is showing at one of the indie theaters here in Boston.
I think it is out on Netflix now.
Okay, double check me on that. I don't think it is out yet. I think it maybe is out at the end of this week. But anyway, haven't seen that one yet. But then, of course, Marriage Story and Irishman, as good, if not better, Oscar chances than Roma last year. And Scott, how do you view this for Netflix?
I mean, it's, you're pointing out that there was a huge expansion this year in the number of awards contenders which Netflix put out. They went from having really only one legitimate contender last year with Roma, as you noted, to having 4 movies this year, which could see Oscar nominations. And you just wonder if that trend will continue to a point where Netflix is, absolutely dominating maybe a couple of years down the line. But either way, I think they have to be pleased. And, this is obviously one of the reasons why Netflix is going to be able to survive in the, in the Disney post-Disney Plus era, with Disney Plus, now fully operational and online. And obviously they're going to be getting a ton of new content with the big licensed properties that they have over there at Disney Plus. But Netflix is still going to be, paramount when it comes to the original content that they're producing. And I think that's just what this illustrates. If you're someone who likes movies, Netflix is going to be the streaming service for you going forward. And they have to be pleased with the haul that they're getting here, especially because, I think Marriage Story and The Irishman have a very good chance, either of them, to win Best Picture at the Oscars.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking primarily about the movies right now, but the fact that Netflix led the way with nominations, again, this is the Globes. We'll see how that translates to the Oscars in terms of nominations, whether they do lead the pack in terms of nominations for Oscars. At the Emmys for the past few years, they've been going head to head with HBO for most nominations. They didn't win it this year; they won it last year, but they do have the most nominations here at the Globes. There are some notable snubs in the TV category, obviously from HBO in particular. That we can talk about a little later, although Netflix got a snub of their own. Anyway, for me, this is a huge step forward for Netflix. Well, I think there's always the big question mark, and we thought this last year with Roma. Clearly, they delivered on it. Is will they be able to continue this level of quality of filmmaking next year? Like, will they have 2, 3, 4 movies next year that are legitimate Oscar contenders, that are not just movies they're putting out, like, posting and praying, so to speak, on Oscar nominations? Because obviously, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, they have the David Fincher movie, right? Which I think is definitely going to be one.
Yeah, I mean, Mank, which is the Fincher movie that you're talking about, being shot in black and white, definitely, going to be something that's going to be pushed for awards consideration. I mean, Fincher has a great track record in the awards conversations, at least of being recognized. And so, I think the question is, here is the coming out party. Maybe Roma was the warning shot last year, maybe here, at the Globes at least. And I imagine this will translate somewhat. Dolomite might fall out of the conversation as we go to the Oscars. It may not get any nominations. It depends on if Eddie Murphy can sneak in for Best Actor. But The Two Popes will probably get a nomination or 2 for Antonio Banderas or Jonathan Pryce. Not Antonio Banderas. No, that's not right. Sorry, Anthony Hopkins. Antonio Banderas is Pain and Glory.
Pain and Glory.
Yeah, which is not Netflix. So Two Popes likely probably to sneak in with a nomination or 2, and then Marriage Story and Irishman are expected to have a big haul at the Oscars as well. And like I said, they're leading the pack over other contenders. I mean, mainly being driven by Sony, I believe, was in second place with nominations by a distance too, because they only got 8 nominations, and most of those were for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Scott, I know you mentioned this as a lock for an Oscar an Oscar Best Picture nomination right now. But why don't we talk about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's chances here? I mean, it's nominated. This is the head scratcher. You said this in your tweet earlier today. This is the head scratcher of the musical or comedy category this year. Maybe less so from a Best Picture standpoint, but definitely doing itself and its actors probably a couple favors by putting them in the musical or comedy section here, because you're going to have Leonardo DiCaprio not going up against an Adam Driver or a Joaquin Phoenix or an Antonio Banderas in the best actor motion picture drama category. Instead, he's going to be going up against Roman Griffin Davis from Jojo Rabbit, Taron Egerton from Rocketman, Eddie Murphy from Dolomite, and Daniel Craig from Knives Out. And, he's probably not the favorite if he does get nominated for the Oscar, but he probably is the favorite in best actor, motion picture, musical, or comedy. That's not to say he will win it, but he probably is the favorite. And then Brad Pitt having a little bit easier run in the supporting actor category as well. When talking about the, the Golden Globes, it's all one category. It's all, they don't separate out for that. But Scott, what about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood here? Do you think they have a good, that Quentin Tarantino and Sony have a good chance of getting a lot of awards here at the Globes?
Yeah, no, I do. I think that this is obviously Quentin Tarantino is someone who he has 2 Oscars. He frequently gets nominated at these award shows. But this is arguably the movie of his that is going to appeal to the people who vote on these awards maybe the most, because it's, it has an older slant to it. It's about characters aging. It's a lot. I mean, obviously there are some very violent moments in it. There are a couple of very violent moments in it, but on the whole, it's a softer and more optimistic movie. It ends on a nice happy note that, you can't say about a lot of other Tarantino movies. And I think that voters are really going to respond to that. So I think it will win for Best Musical or Comedy at the Golden Globes. I do think that. And I think it has a good shot for Best Picture as well. As for the actors, Leonardo DiCaprio, I think, is going to be competing mainly with Eddie Murphy here at the Golden Globes for who's going to take home that Best Actor, Musical, or Comedy. But I'll be rooting for him. I think he's fantastic in the movie. And I think he has a great shot here, even though, as you said, I don't think he has a great shot at the Oscars. I do think Brad Pitt has a very good shot at the Oscars. Best Supporting Actor is a little bit up in the air, but Brad Pitt is one of the 1 or 2 front runners up there with the guys from The Irishman and Tom Hanks from A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood that I think are going to be front runners at the Oscars. And I could definitely see Brad Pitt taking home both the Golden Globe and the Oscar. I could also see him not taking home either of them. But either way, it's a great performance, and I'm happy to see this movie getting so much love because not everyone loved it when it came out, but I think it's one of Tarantino's best.
Yeah, you talked about the 3 big awards it's up for, but it is up for 5, and that's because Tarantino's also got Best Director, the Best Director nomination, as well as the screenplay nomination as well for himself. So there's a lot of I guess we have the potential to be hearing Once Upon a Time in Hollywood a lot on January 5th when the Globes do happen, and I think even before then. Well, see, I guess did the Oscar noms come out before then? I can't actually remember whether or not they come out this year before then. Usually they do, but the Oscars this year is much earlier than it is normally, being the second weekend in February. But, until then, I think that's probably good enough there. I think I want to switch gears briefly here and talk about something that I think will continue to be a conversation about this particular movie throughout award season and where it shakes out ultimately, and that's Parasite. It has 3 nominations here at the Golden Globes. One is it did not get nominated in Best Picture, but it did get nominated in Best Director for Bong Joon-ho, Best Screenplay as well for Bong Joon-ho and Han Jin-won. And then I can't actually find the other nomination that it has. And maybe it did get Best Picture. Am I missing that? No, it didn't. So I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to quickly scroll through the list here what its 3rd nomination is, Scott. But what do you think of Parasite's chances?
Maybe a Best Original Score or something. This is an interesting one, right? Because you want to say this is kind of the token foreign nominee, kind of like Roma was last year, right? And in the end, we kind of thought Roma might have a chance at Best Picture at the Oscars, but ultimately they went with a conventional pick and went with Green Book instead. So you could definitely see them doing the same thing with Parasite this year. And even though this might be the most universally beloved movie of any movie in the hunt, everyone that has seen this movie has raved about it. It has a 4.6 average rating on Letterboxd right now, which is just off the chain. but you wonder, is the very fact that it is a foreign film going to turn off some Oscar voters? As disappointing as that may be, I could see it happening, and I could see them going with a safer choice like The Irishman or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I will say again that I'm very glad that those are the safer choices this year and not something like Green Book, because I think those films are really great as well. But Parasite is a movie that has really just captivated audiences. Again, the box office numbers were huge for considering this was an independent foreign film.
Yeah, second highest grossing independent film of the year behind Peanut Butter Falcon.
Yeah, no, it crushed. And so that gives me hope that maybe it does have the chance of taking something home. I think maybe where it has the best shot is possibly Best Director, because I think Bong Joon-ho, in the same way that Alfonso Cuarón last year was pretty much the lock for Best Director all the way through, Bong Joon-ho is really getting the praise for this movie, overshadowing a lot of the performances and the technical aspects and everything that is also excellent in this movie. I think the main talking point that people are coming out of this movie talking about is the vision that Bong Joon-ho brought to this movie. And obviously he's had a good track record. He's been doing it, and he's been successful and beloved for a while, but this movie has really helped him break through. And so it would not surprise me to see him take home that Best Director prize if Parasite is going to take home anything. And personally, I would love to see it win any and all awards that it is nominated for, because it's one of the year's best.
Yeah, so I missed the obvious one. The obvious third nomination that it has is Best Foreign Language Film. So it's in there. Obviously, the Golden Globes, I shouldn't say obviously, the Golden Globes, I know that there's some changes this year for the Oscars category that was once foreign language film is now Best International Feature or whatever. I don't know what they're calling it. But now the way that it works with the Golden Globes, and that is a little bit different from how it works with the Oscars, is that I think the percent of the movie that has to be in a foreign language just shakes that a little bit different. So The Farewell is a foreign language film, even though it was, of course, produced and distributed in the U.S. So it's going up against The Farewell, Les Miserables, which is the French entry in the foreign language film category, Pain and Glory, which is Spain's entry.
I know Les Mis is not a French, because Portrait of a Lady on Fire is France's.
So the Portrait of a Lady on Fire is also in the foreign language film category, and they both are French. At the Oscars, you can only submit one movie, so it's going to be a little bit different. We'll see which one France has chosen. I mean, we could go look because they've already submitted it, but at the Globes, again, it works a little bit differently. So 2 French films, a Spanish film, Parasite, and The Farewell. And I don't know, Scott, if you think that Parasite, I don't know if you revise what you say it has the best chance of winning. Like, probably foreign language film is the category it has the best chance of winning in here, but I think that's some strong competition. I haven't seen Pain and Glory. I haven't seen Portrait of a Lady on Fire, and I also have not seen Les Miserables, but I mean,
The Farewell is going to be stiff competition. Yeah,
I was going to say The Farewell is definitely stiff competition, because it's another one of those movies that, even though as an indie movie, did extremely well at the box office this year, got a lot of eyes on it, and a lot of hype for its lead actress, Awkwafina. Lulu Wang, and maybe that now is a great time to shift to this topic, got left out in the cold on Best Director, but she and all of her female comrades in directing got left out again from the directing category. Scott, we'll talk about the issue of race, diversity as it comes to race here in a second, but let's start with another year has gone by, and the Golden Globes has still not nominated a female in the Best Director category. This year, the notable exceptions here: Greta Gerwig, Lulu Wang, Alma Hadel, Marielle Heller, Alma Harrell, Lorene Scafaria, Alma Harrell for Honey Boy, which I just saw last night. Excellent film. Right there, a whole category for Best Director.
Yeah. I mean, you can go on and on.
Yeah, Melina Matsoukas. Whether or not I think that she would be the one to get in over all these people, I loved Queen and Slim. It's in my
an
top
option,
6. Absolutely. So there, we just listed 5 female directors that they could nominate. That's that is the entire Best Director category right there. And still, they haven't managed to nominate one. Scott, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's pretty. So, I mean, I'm someone who, yes, we absolutely need diversity. We need female directors to be getting acknowledged in these categories. But I also if the nominees are fine, then I don't have as huge of an issue with it. But the problem is you have Todd Phillips nominated. Todd Phillips. And that no way in heck should that be happening. That's like Adam McKay getting nominated last year for Vice. I'm not sure Todd Phillips really did very much at all. behind the camera with Joker, and he does not deserve to be in this in consideration for this award at all. And a lot of the directors that we mentioned in the films that we mentioned there absolutely are worthy. And I mean, I haven't seen Little Women yet, but I know I'm going to love this movie. And Greta Gerwig obviously is a brilliant director, as she showed with Lady Bird. I absolutely think she should be in the conversation. I think Marielle Heller, what she did with A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood is really one of the more surprising things that I've seen this year, because this could have been a typical schmaltzy Oscar biopic, feel good story. But I think that she looks at the story from a very different angle. And her stamp is all over this movie. It's a lot stranger and more off the wall movie than I was expecting from this movie about Mr. Rogers that is obviously marketed at a wide audience. And so I think she deserves a lot of credit for making something a lot more thoughtful than perhaps I expected from this movie. Lorene Scafaria with Hustlers, that was one of my biggest surprises of this year. I loved Hustlers, and from the trailers, I thought this movie looked terrible. And it's, easily in my top 15 movies of the year so far. I really loved Hustlers. And so Scafaria deserves consideration as well. The other names you've mentioned, absolutely. So for me, like, the diversity thing is obviously important, but it makes it even clearer that they are just flat out ignoring female filmmakers when you have Todd Phillips getting nominated over some very worthy female filmmakers. It's not like you have a quality comparison of, okay, maybe they put, I'm trying to think of someone who's not nominated in there. I mean, like, this would never happen, but if they put like Ari Aster in there instead of Todd Phillips, I'd be like, okay, yeah, like, there were some great female directors, but maybe I'm more okay with it. But that's not the case. They have Todd Phillips in there.
Yeah, and someone that we somehow have left off this, but is the director of the movie I've seen the most times in
Olivia Wilde.
And that's Olivia Wilde for Booksmart. I was just putting up my Letterboxd list of my ranked movies of the year, and the fact that Booksmart, Queen and Slim are my 5 and 6 right now. And those are two of the best movies of the year. And I did say I would have been surprised if someone like Melina Matsoukas got a Best Director nom. I would have been surprised if Olivia Wilde got a Best Director nom. But some of these other people that you're mentioning, I didn't like A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood as much as you did, but I would have totally understood and been on board with Marielle Heller getting a nomination.
Yeah, and you understand the comments I'm making, though, about how it is a much more different movie than you might expect.
Absolutely. And so it's really disappointing to see, that happen again this year. It was something that we talked about, I think, last year as well, when we talked about the Golden Globe nominations. And hopefully we don't have to talk about it next year, but likely we probably will, it's just how it goes. But now let's switching gears to talk about the diversity in terms of race element here. In some ways, the Globes have done an okay job. I mean, they have Antonio Banderas nominated in the best actor drama category. They've got Eddie Murphy,
Jennifer Lopez
in the best actor musical comedy, and then Cynthia Erivo and J-Lo. And
Awkwafina.
Yeah, I was gonna say Awkwafina, Ana de Armas as well. They have the luxury that the Oscars don't have of being able to nominate 10 people essentially in each of the best actor and actress categories. And so it helps their ability to be a little bit more diverse in their selections. That being said, for the number of options that they have, spots to fill, particularly when it comes to African American actors and actresses, again, it feels like there's some gaping holes with people getting nominated. I mean, I haven't seen The Two Popes again. I didn't see Jonathan Price's performance in that movie, but to leave out someone like Kelvin Harrison Jr. Or Sterling K. Brown, even from Waves, there's some, I think, very obvious movies. Daniel Kaluuya in Queen and Slim.
Octavia Spencer for Loose is one that stands out for me.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'm completely blanking on the other star of Queen and Slim right now.
Jodie Turner-Smith.
I was going to say some variation of that wasn't quite right. I think those are all fantastic performances, and even
Michael B. Jordan in Just Mercy, which we haven't seen yet. Jamie Foxx has been getting more buzz than Michael B. Jordan has for Just Mercy, but
which would be a supporting actor category.
But still, he didn't get nominated.
Well, yeah, I was going to say in the supporting actor category, I mean, that is completely white. Tom Hanks, Anthony Hopkins, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci, Brad Pitt. On the supporting actress side, you do have J-Lo, but Kathy Bates, Annette Bening, Laura Dern, Margot Robbie. Again, like, people who
Annette
are
Bening should not
mostly deserving. I know that you feel differently about Annette Bening. I can kind of see it, but with the wealth of talent out there, someone like Taylor Russell would have been a great inclusion, I think, for Best Supporting Actress. Given that Annette Bening, if that's the direction you were going to go, there's other options that you could have done that whether or not they're head and shoulders above Annette Bening's performance in The Report, equally good for sure in ways.
Yeah, again, Octavia Spencer is the one that stands out to me there.
I keep forgetting Octavia Spencer.
Yeah, but no, it is. I think the thing that is most concerning, because you're right, like looking across the board, it's not that glaring. They did, get some pretty diverse nominees in there. But the thing that strikes me heading forward is that a lot of these people aren't going to be in the running at the Oscars. And so I foresee this conversation being amped up and even worse when the Academy releases their nominations, because the two Black nominees that you noted, right, Eddie Murphy and Cynthia Erivo, I don't think Cynthia Erivo has a shot at all. I think Eddie Murphy has a very slim shot at an Oscar nomination, and those are the only African American nominees. Elsewhere, like I think Awkwafina might be on the outside looking in for Best Actress. Ana de Armas obviously not going to be in the hunt. And I think, J-Lo obviously will be nominated. And Antonio Banderas has a very good shot, I think, for a nomination. But where do you go beyond there? Like like I said, I foresee this conversation being amped up a lot more in a month's time when the Academy Award nomination comes out. And you're right. Like there are so many options to choose from. You hit on the one for me, Kelvin Harrison Jr. I think not just one, but two performances this year in Waves and in Loose. You could nominate him in Best Supporting Actor or Best Actor. Honestly, take your pick. These are both Oscar-worthy performances. The guy is an absolute star on the rise. He's going to be a huge name in just a few years, I think. But he doesn't have a shot that I see right now. Taylor Russell, like you said, excellent in Waves. Octavia Spencer, I keep bringing her up, but I think Loose is one of the best ensemble casts of this year. Not a diverse person, but Naomi Watts, I think, also belonged in the conversation for that. I thought she was excellent as well for that movie. So yes, it is a shame, not necessarily looking at the Globes nominees as a whole, but looking ahead to the Oscars and knowing that we may end up with 3 or 4 non-white actors across all of the acting categories nominated. And, it's a consistent problem that I'm not sure what the solution is, honestly.
Yeah. Also just to throw my gun again, just because I know you haven't seen Queen and Slim, Daniel Kaluuya would have been, a very good person to be nominated in the Best Actor category, again, going as an option alongside Kelvin Harrison Jr., things like that. And it's disappointing. And, I will, raise my hand and say, is it entirely the Golden Globes' fault? Is it entirely the Oscars' fault? Because this was a year where there weren't that many out there opportunities for African-American actors and actresses in Hollywood to really sink their teeth into roles and have a chance at getting an Oscar nomination. And so part of it definitely, because we just listed a whole bunch of options that they did have, part of it is on the awards shows, but part of it is also on Hollywood. Maybe last year was a better year for diversity in acting, but even then it didn't translate necessarily to nominations then. So clearly there's 2 fronts to be fighting this battle on, and we're just going to have to do it. Yeah. I think, we can talk some more about individual movies. There are some films obviously that are getting nominated, like 1917 and the like, that we have not seen yet. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. Obviously 1917 getting a lot of nominations for the more technical aspects, and I expect to see them even more at the Oscars when there are more technical categories. It got 3 nominations, sorry. One, of course, for Best Director and Sam Mendes and his role there behind the camera, as well as Best Original Score for, I believe it's Thomas Newman who's doing that. And then I'm not sure about, obviously, and then Best Motion Picture Drama. So obviously we expect to see Roger Deakins featuring heavily, if not the favorite for the cinematography Oscar. It has some other probably has some other chances in editing as well, given the fact that this movie is, I don't know how many real cuts there are in the film, but it's obviously edited together to look like one continuous shot.
Right.
Again, I don't know how many takes there are in the actual film, because obviously there's just some master work done behind, in the editing room there. But that's a movie that we expect to see more of at the Oscars, and I'm still really looking forward to finally seeing that when it does come out in theaters. Getting a limited release on Christmas. I don't know if I'll be able to see it before its wider release on January 10th, though. Scott, any other movies you think we're missing? And we can also talk about movies that we're not seeing here, if you believe there are any hardcore snubs. I mean, you talked about Octavia Spencer getting left out in the cold, and some of the other African American actors and actresses that got left out in the cold. But any other snubs that you see here?
Yeah, I mean, this always comes down to what your definition of a snub is. I mean, there's some things that I am very disappointed about. Like, for example, we talked about Rocketman briefly getting nominated for the musical or comedy category as maybe sort of the token musical this year. I think Wild Rose would have been an infinitely better choice there. And, likewise, Jessie Buckley getting a nomination for Best Actress in a musical or comedy. I think the fact that this movie has been ignored is a travesty. And of course, the most glaring being not getting nominated for Best Original Song for Glasgow, which is like, it is not even close the best song of this year. It is better than Shallow was last year. I mean, it's not even close for me. And it doesn't look like it's going to be nominated for the Oscar. Instead, they're going for these ridiculously bland and boring safe choices like the Beyonce song from The Lion King, which is just absolutely laughable. But, if Beyonce, I won't go any further than that, but I don't think the people are here for the Beyonce slander, but the fact that the song is nominated is a joke. And so that's something that does bother me a little bit. Did Little Women get a nomination for a best film category? I don't believe it did, right?
Best motion picture?
Yeah.
It did not, no.
Okay. Obviously I don't want to say too much having not seen the film yet, but I could see that being a snub, at least in my book, because I think it is awards fair. And from what I'm seeing, Greta Gerwig puts an interesting spin on the story that has been told a lot of times, but she's able to bring something new to it. So I could see that being a snub. And again, a lot of the other snubs are stuff for me that never really had a legitimate shot, like Midsommar, Dark Waters not getting a nomination in any sort of nominations. Obviously, very disappointing to me, as I love those movies, but not something that I really expected. So I guess the main one for me is Wild Rose. This movie should have been Man, which wasn't really that much better than Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah, no, that's probably fair. All right. I mean, I think I feel more or less the same. I think obviously it was nice to see that Beanie Feldstein got a Best Actress musical or comedy for, of course, her role as Molly Davidson in Booksmart. I was actually quite surprised by that, but pleasantly so, because Booksmart getting the nomination was music to my soul. Love that movie. But Olivia Wilde.
Yeah, another movie that only got one nomination, I think, is Ford versus Ferrari. And that kind of goes to one of my big predictions for I think that this movie is not going to be nominated for Best Picture, despite the fact that this has all the trappings of a movie that would be nominated for Best Picture at the Oscar. I don't know. It did well at the box office, but I'm just not sure that their campaign is really striking a chord with a lot of people right now. I think that the field for Best Picture is tough right now. And like I said, there are 3 or 4 movies that I think are locks. There are a couple movies that I think are most likely will be in there. Movies like 1917 and Jojo Rabbit, I think, are definitely going to get in there. And then this movie, I think, is even in a tier below that. So I think it will depend on how many movies they ultimately nominate for Best Picture. But I wouldn't be surprised.
9 the last 2 years, right? 8 or 9 the last 2 years.
I wouldn't be surprised if this movie gets shut out at the Oscars, except for maybe an acting nomination. Again, it's going to be difficult for an acting nomination, I think, because, as we've talked about before, Matt Damon and Christian Bale are both campaigning as lead actors. So you could see them stealing votes from each other, even though, of course, Christian Bale did get the nomination here, and I think is probably the better performance. I don't know. I just don't know if the Oscars are gonna go that way as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know how I feel that Christian Bale was the better performer in the film. I think he had a lot more to do and a lot more emotion to show. And did it better. But I'm not on board with that. I think that Ford v Ferrari will get a Best Picture nomination. I think it might be one of the few nominations that it does get, is the thing. And honestly, not dissimilar to Jojo Rabbit, although it definitely is going to get a nomination for screenplay. Probably. I can't see a world in which it doesn't get a nomination for screenplay for Taika.
I could even see it getting a Best Director nomination potentially.
That's a tough race, man. I don't know about that, but we'll see. I mean, we'll see. It could be one of those things where
it's a tough race, but I mean, Todd Phillips might not be in there for the Oscars, so you got to put somebody else in there.
For sure. I don't. I hope Todd Phillips isn't in there for the Oscar. I mean, that would just be so disappointing if it is. But I mean, who knows? Maybe who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I think that maybe Taika gets in there for Best Director. Maybe not, but it could. I mean, Jojo Rabbit is one of those, however, that it could be an Argo situation where Taika doesn't get a nomination for Best Director, but the film wins Best Picture still. So I mean, we've seen that happen before, of course, with Ben Affleck getting snubbed in the Best Director category, but then Argo winning the Best Picture back in 2012, I believe. And I think that is possible. I don't think JoJo is the right pick for Best Picture this year, but it certainly is a better option than Green Book last year.
And another snub that I was just thinking of, going back to Little Women for a second, Florence Pugh did not get nominated. And I think that is a shock because I think a lot of people feel like she's one of the top 3 horses in the race for Best Supporting Actress, up there with Laura Dern and Jennifer Lopez, of course. And she was not nominated at all. However, her co-star Saoirse Ronan was in what I think was probably the only nomination that Little Women got. So a little bit of a surprise there, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the surprises too, to go along and just to stay in that Best Supporting Actress category, which I mean, honestly, we could see 3 of the 5 could be totally different in the Oscar race for sure, and that's because like Kathy Bates getting a nomination for
she won at one of the preliminary awards things that we had been talking about on some like
National Board of Review or the New York Film Critics Circle or whatever. She did win that role, which was really surprising to me. I mean, we're seeing Richard Jewell this weekend. It's what our episode's going to be about next week, and so I'll reserve judgment until then. But I didn't realize that the hype around her was so good. And one of the things, again, I meant to mention this earlier, but I don't know if it's a snub, but again, kind of a disappointing thing and a little bit surprising. We'll see if it changes as other award shows pop up here. But Xiao Zhu-Jin not getting nominated for The Farewell. Of course, she plays the grandmother in The Farewell. That was a bit surprising to me.
Yeah, no, I think she's in the conversation for sure. And right, there's another opportunity for diversity that the Oscars is going to have to, go in a new direction and pick someone who wasn't nominated at the Golden Globes. The SAG Awards will come out tomorrow. The nominations are coming out in the morning tomorrow. So I'll be interested to see, too, whether she can get in there for that, because that may spell a better chance for her Oscar potential.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but those Screen Actor Guild elitists, though, she probably doesn't even have her Screen Actors Guild card. I mean, to be honest.
Yeah.
Right, she's never done a movie before, right? So
yeah, no, I don't think so. Yeah, I mean,
I
don't know, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I think that Lulu Wang kind of plucked her out there. But anyway, yeah, I think there's obviously a lot to be said. Not everyone can get nominated too at the same time. Maybe we're being a little bit harsh because not everyone can be nominated. Yeah. But at the same time, obviously we've pointed out some people who we feel that weren't very deserving, that I'm sure who feel they were very deserving. Todd Phillips is very self-important. If you saw Joker, you could understand how he feels that way, because that's that entire movie. But anyway, moving on, TV shows, Scott, I want to touch briefly on, we've been going here for about, a little bit over half an hour now, and want to touch on for 5 or 10 minutes about the TV categories. We don't have to go through category by category, but I do want to talk about things, a couple things that I was really excited about from a TV perspective. And then we can talk about things that were, a little surprising, talk about the big snubs. Because if we're talking about true snubs, the TV side of things is where the true snubs happen.
Yeah.
We'll start with the positive first, though, and that is that my favorite piece of media in 2019 so far was one of the top nomination receivers at the Golden Globes, and that is unbelievable, Scott. Most of these nominations are in the, I
know it was unbelievable, but what was the show? Sorry.
Yeah, unbelievable. Who's on first? Unbelievable. So it is nominated for best limited series mini series, best mini series there, as well as getting 3 acting nominations, 2 in the best actress in a mini series category for Caitlin Dever, who plays Marie Adler, and Merritt Weaver, who plays one of the detectives, Karen Duvall, and then best supporting actress for Toni Collette, the other detective in the show. Scott, like I said, this is my favorite piece of media in 2019, and I was so thrilled to see Unbelievable get 4 nominations.
Yeah, Scott, I haven't made my way all the way through Unbelievable yet, but I really have liked what, like, again, is a tough word to use.
Appreciated.
I've appreciated and admired what I have watched so far. It is a tough watch for me, and I tend to gravitate towards things, because I don't have a lot of time to watch TV. I tend to gravitate towards things like like my favorite show, which we'll talk about, which did get in there, is The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which I think is just like the most upbeat. Like I was watching it today and just thinking, there's conflict in this show, but it really doesn't feel like there's that much conflict. Like it just, puts a smile on my face, brings me a lot of joy. And that's the type of thing that I tend to gravitate towards when I watch TV. And so that's why it's taking me a little bit longer to get through Unbelievable, but I do hope to finish it. And I am happy to see it get nominated because it is telling a very, very important and relevant story.
Yeah. So that's a Netflix shop. Also, one of the other top nomination receivers is The Crown. Olivia Colman taking the place of Claire Foy as I don't even remember which queen the actual show is based. Queen Elizabeth, is that what it is?
Elizabeth II, yeah, the current queen.
Yeah, Queen Elizabeth II. She's playing an older version. Season 3 fast forwards a little bit in time, but it's also, of course, nominated for best TV show drama, I believe it is. And then there's a couple other nominations in there because it also has 4 nominations. And HBO's Chernobyl, which I haven't got around to seeing yet, but I do hope to watch along with several other things. Some of the other big nomination receivers are Barry, which is a show that I discovered earlier this year and absolutely love. I think Bill Hader is phenomenal in that show. Big Little Lies second season gets 3 nominations. Fleabag's final season gets 3 nominations. Succession, which is an HBO show. Fosse Verdon, which was kind of the big spoiler Fosse Verdon, which was kind of the big spoiler at the Emmys for some of the people who maybe had higher hopes for Emmy awards. It spoiled the show a little bit there. Particularly, I believe it's Michelle Williams is spoiling the show for like Amy Adams, who was nominated for Sharp Objects, which isn't eligible because it was nominated last year at the Golden Globes, but was eligible at the Emmys. Scott, but I just listed a bunch of different shows that got a lot of nominations, but the snubs. I mean, I think that's like the other main talking point for the TV shows, and it's kind of incredible. I mean, one of them, was so immediately obvious, and I'm sometimes bad at recognizing snubs, but this one to me was so obvious and fits in line with one of the conversations that we were having earlier about diversity at the Golden Globes, and that is When They See Us at Netflix receiving 0 nominations, completely shut out of all categories. Obviously, it would be in the miniseries category. But to me, incredible that did not get any nominations. The other snubs, one of them, actually, I guess both of them over at HBO, and that is for Watchmen, which I didn't immediately recognize as a snub because I didn't think it was eligible because it's obviously just finished. I believe it just finished last weekend. I didn't realize it was eligible for awards.
No, there's one more episode this week.
Yeah. Oh, there's one more episode. So, it's season finale coming up, this Sunday night. Didn't realize it was eligible, but it got 0 nominations, which is pretty incredible. I mean, I haven't seen the show yet. It's next on my watch list, but I've heard phenomenal things about it, particularly, someone like Regina King, who's, won in the Academy Award last year for Best Supporting Actress, won at the Golden Globes last year too, getting shut out. It's pretty remarkable. And then Euphoria, which maybe is a little bit less of a surprise to for you, Scott, but I haven't seen it, but it was a snub.
And another show that has a lot of diversity in it. You have an African-American leading actress. You have the second lead being a transgender actress. Like, again, everything, a lot of stuff getting ignored. But these happen to be all things that I have watched, amazingly or not. Amazingly enough. When They See Us, I thought was a fantastic and powerful miniseries. Definitely think, and looking at the miniseries field, it's a really strong field, right? Like a lot of people have been talking about a lot of these shows. And read them all down again. I know Chernobyl, Unbelievable are in there. What are the other nominees that are in? There was one that stuck out to me as being, well, I think it should have gotten in there over that.
Yeah, so the nominations for the best miniseries or television film are Catch-22, Chernobyl, Fosse Verdon, The Loudest Voiced, and Unbelievable.
Yeah, so Catch-22 is the one which surprised me because I haven't really heard anyone talking about this. I wanted to watch it, but it just haven't gotten around to it yet because I do love the book. But the other 4 series there that you named off, people say that all of these shows are incredible. So Catch-22 is the one that I'm surprised to see get in there over When They See Us. I definitely think When They See Us probably deserve. I haven't seen Catch-22, so I don't want to say. But again, the diversity conversation.
No one was talking about it.
No one was talking about it, and everyone at the time when They See Us came out,
and still now. Around the Emmys, like it was nominated and won a bunch of Emmys.
And you have Ava DuVernay, who is, one of the most talked about Black filmmakers working right now, as the person behind this. So that's another huge factor. Euphoria,
and the political climate of being about the Central Park, being a dramatization of the Central Park Five, and the fact that Donald Trump, who still to this day insists that the Central Park Five should have been executed and should still be in prison, who is our president, like that's still politically.
They work that into the show very, very effectively. Yeah, Euphoria now, it's one of my favorite things that I've watched this year. However, I don't think that I really realistically thought that this show was going to get a nomination because it's about teenagers and this okay boomer, moments here. Like the boomers who vote on these things aren't going to pay attention to this show, even though it was one of the most talked about shows of 2019, even though the boomer critics who were forced to watch it were actually like, hey, this is pretty good. This is actually really well done. Despite all of these factors, when it comes down to it, I don't think it really ever had a shot, even in the acting categories for somebody like Zendaya. I just don't think it was ever going to happen. And then the other one you mentioned, Watchmen, I'm very surprised by this. Because I am loving Watchmen. I am 2 episodes behind right now, but I think Damon Lindelof is as good as it gets in television, and it's probably funny now that I mentioned that when I like to watch TV, I watch things that are happy and upbeat, and then I talk about
that actually
Euphoria and When They See Us and Watchmen. But
how many penises are in Euphoria?
Let's not go there. But Watchmen is incredible. It's very dark. It's incredible. But I mean, another thing too, you talk about Regina King being a black actress and being the star of the show. The show is very race is a huge factor in the show, and explores the Tulsa race riots and massacre that happened. There's an entire episode where Regina King's character basically goes back in time and relives the experience that her grandfather. No, I mean, this is not really spoiled. This is literally the description of the episode that her grandfather had, and the racial violence and stuff that he had to face back 50 years ago. And so that is a huge element of the show. And so you have to wonder again, is that why it's being ignored? Who knows? But this is a fantastic show. And Damon Lindelof is one of the best out there. With that being said, his last show, The Leftovers, was one of the best shows of all time, in my opinion. Never really got much awards consideration for anything. So I just wonder if there's something about his style. Obviously, Lost was a different story, but that's been a long time ago now. And maybe there's something about, the style, the way, particularly the social commentary and critique that is in a lot of his work. Maybe something about that is not striking a chord with voters. But ultimately, none of this stuff matters, right? Because everyone is obsessed with Watchmen right now. It's either the number 1 or number 2 most watched cable show of the year. And so those are the things I think which are ultimately going to matter, not, the recognition from this shadowy Hollywood foreign press.
Which we didn't talk about this up front. Maybe we should have. But the Hollywood foreign press, it's a reminder. It's 90 people who are voting on these things. It's 90 people. I mean, the Oscars are voted on by over 7,000 people. Yeah. So that puts it a little bit in perspective that, yes, people do use this as a metric to what's going to happen at the Oscars. I mean, Green Book won at the Globes and it won at the Oscars. It happens sometimes. But, it really is a very, very small subset of the people who are voting on the Oscars. Obviously, for TV stuff, it doesn't matter for the Oscars because there's no TV stuff there. But it applies to kind of the entire conversation that we've been having here. And for me, I mean, the last thing that I'll say before we wrap up is that, the final thing, neither of us somehow watch, we have this podcast, but don't watch the show. Game of Thrones kind of got left out in the cold, only got 1 nomination, I believe I think it was for Kit Harington.
It was, yeah.
Yeah. And the kind of key takeaway from the TV category, besides the stuff that we've already talked about in something that we didn't mention, is that you talked about Damon Lindelof and all the awards that Lost did have, at least all the nominations. I don't remember how many awards it won over its run, but the nominations that it received this year, first year, no broadcast television nominations whatsoever, period. End of sentence. So if Lost was on that, on broadcast television, if Lost was on broadcast television today, would it even be getting noticed? Would it even get nominated? The full shift towards your premium cable networks or streaming services has happened.
Laugh tracks are finally out, baby.
Well, that's a totally different conversation to have. Maybe laugh tracks and how it manipulates.
The Big Bang Theory season 18 has been ignored.
Yeah, its final season. It did have its final season this year, right?
Shame.
Yeah, I know, right?
Who knows? I just assumed that show is just going to go on in perpetuity, even though I don't know anyone who actually watches it. And talking of this too, Young Sheldon. How is this still a show that comes on? Who watches Young Sheldon?
Yeah, I mean, Scott, one of the things that
who's the audience for that show?
Well, one of the things that I constantly wonder, which is, and I know that this will show my perspective on television. Maybe it's one that's shared by the Hollywood Foreign Press. I don't know, but like, I don't know who are the people who continue to watch, like who drive Netflix to spend $100 million on Friends for a year. Like who rewatches Friends? Who rewatches The Office? Who rewatches?
That's a different story. Literally everyone.
How I Met Your Mother. But I know, but like, I don't understand why people do that. There's so much new good television every year. I gotta get off this soapbox. But I don't understand people who only rewatch.
If you watch Young Sheldon or God Friended Me, please contact me. I just want to know why. I just want to talk. Okay.
Well, how do you do you count Better Call Saul in that as a spinoff from Breaking Bad, or?
No, I mean that's AMC. I don't really consider that like that's like really that's not really a network show.
No, it's not. You're right, it's not. But it's a spinoff that I was just like, why does this exist? Whatever. All right, time to get out of here before I get bad comments from all the people who watch Friends, How I Met Your Mother, and The Office on repeat.
All the Young Sheldon head.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Scott, that should do it for our little special episode of Golden Globe nominations. Where can people find you on Twitter?
Follow me on Letterboxd at Scarby.
Oh, cool. Even better. You're right. Maybe we should forget Twitter. Nobody cares about Twitter. Letterboxd is where it's at. And that can be found at Shelton 2013 on Twitter and on Letterboxd as well, for that matter. And you can also find our podcast on Twitter, not on Letterboxd. You can't find our podcast on Letterboxd yet. But we'd love it if you followed us over on Twitter at MediaPlugPods. And we'd love it even more if you checked out our podcast Patreon page. That's www.patreon.com/MediaPlugPods, where there are a bunch of different reward tiers. Depending on how much you're willing or able to pledge the podcast, that would help us out. Contributing even at the $1 level would help us out. And, make this a sustainable financial endeavor. We don't spend a lot of money on the podcast, to be fair, but we do have to pay an annual hosting fee. So help us out with that.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah. Sorry. I pay an annual hosting fee. That's www.
I pay for every movie that I see.
Yeah, that's true. www.patreon.com/MediaPlugPods. Check it out for yourself. If you choose not to support us over on Patreon, however, that's totally fine. You can still find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, wherever you will listen to your podcasts, where we'd appreciate you rate and review us, subscribe, share, all that jazz. Scott, we have so much content programming coming out right now to plug. We actually, just before this live recording, recorded our final part of our Star Wars countdown, talking about The Last Jedi. That's going to be coming out this Sunday if you're listening to this live. Probably I'll post this before this Sunday too, so you can listen to that this Sunday coming out. Our most recent episode of the podcast is about Marriage Story, which you mentioned is one of the major Oscar contenders in so many different categories, especially Best Picture. And then next week we'll be talking about Richard Jewell, and after that Star Wars Rise of Skywalker. So lots of stuff coming, and we have our end of the year discussions coming up soon, which is just the best time to be listening to our podcast when we do that best of 2019 episode, which will be coming up at the turn of the year, of course. But I think that should do it for this special episode. For Scott Harvey, I am Scott Shelton. Thank you for listening.
See you guys.